You know what's wild? Donald Trump can literally orchestrate an international kidnapping and somehow, we're over here in Canada talking about pipelines. Like, the man just sent special forces into Venezuela to grab their president like it's a Netflix heist movie, and Danielle Smith's first thought is, you know what this means? Pipeline time, baby. I cannot make this stuff up. Welcome back to Canadian Insights, where Canadian politics is somehow weirder than whatever's happening south of the border, and that's saying something. Today we're unpacking whether Trump's absolutely bonkers Venezuelan raid is going to magically manifest a pipeline to BC's coast, spoiler alert it won't, and why Alberta's premier is trying to make it happen anyway. Let's dive in. Okay, first things first. Let's acknowledge the elephant in the room, or should I say, the dictator in the helicopter? Donald Trump, in full Trump fashion, decided that diplomacy is for losers and just straight up had US forces raid Venezuela and capture Nicolas Maduro. Yep. Captured a sitting head of state. I mean, technically sitting is generous since he was probably running for his life, but you get the point. Now, whether you think Maduro deserved it or not, and let's be real, the guy's track record is not great, this is an absolutely wild move on the international stage. It's like watching someone flip the Monopoly board because they are losing, except with actual geopolitical consequences. But here's the hilarious part, and credit where credit's due as they say. For most of Monday, nobody was talking about the Epstein files. You know, that other massive scandal involving powerful people doing terrible things? Yeah, that one just got completely buried under the Venezuela news cycle. It's like Trump accidentally did a public service by being so chaotic that we forgot about the other chaos for a minute. Honestly, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of the strategy. Create such a big distraction that everything else just fades into the background. Genius or insanity? Maybe both. Probably both. Now, naturally, because this is Canadian politics and we can't just have normal reactions to anything, someone had to find a way to make this about us. Enter Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, fossil fuel enthusiast, and apparently professional crisis exploiter. Within hours of the Venezuela news breaking, Smith sending emails to reporters basically saying, hey, you know what this Venezuela situation proves? We need more pipelines. Specifically, we need a pipeline to BC's coast. Because nothing says logical policy response like using an international military operation to push your pre-existing agenda. It's like if your house flooded and your neighbor used it as an opportunity to sell you a lawnmower. Sure, technically you might need one eventually, but maybe read the room? Smith's argument, if we're being generous enough to call it that, is pretty straightforward. Venezuela's a mess, Maduro's gone, their oil production might come back online, which means more competition for Canadian oil, which means we need to diversify our markets by building a pipeline to the Pacific so we can sell to Asia. Boom. Crisis solved. Pipeline justified. Everyone go home. Except, and this is a pretty big except, that logic has more holes than Swiss cheese at a shooting range. Let's break this down because it's actually kind of fascinating how predictable this whole thing is. Smith's been pushing for pipelines since forever. Every premier of Alberta since the dawn of oil has been pushing for pipelines. It's basically in the job description at this point. Premier of Alberta, must love oil, must hate federal regulations, must mention pipelines in every speech, preferably multiple times. So when the Venezuela situation happened, Smith didn't suddenly have an epiphany. She just found a convenient news hook to hang her same old talking points on. And look, I'm not saying diversifying export markets is a bad idea. It's actually not. But pretending that Trump's military adventure in South America somehow makes a BC pipeline more urgent or more feasible is just, it's peak political opportunism, folks. Here's the thing that makes this whole situation extra spicy. British Columbia, you know, the place where this magical pipeline is supposed to go, doesn't really want it. Shocking, I know. Turns out a lot of people living on the coast aren't super thrilled about the idea of massive tankers full of oil cruising through their pristine waters. There are environmental concerns, indigenous rights issues, local opposition, and a whole web of political complications that make building a pipeline to BC about as easy as teaching a cat to fetch. It's theoretically possible but good luck actually making it happen. And this is where Smith's email becomes less about actual policy and more about political theater. She knows that building a pipeline to BC isn't going to happen tomorrow, or next month, or probably even next year. There are legal challenges, consultation requirements, environmental assessments, and approximately 7,000 other bureaucratic hoops to jump through. But by tying her pipeline push to the Venezuela crisis, she gets to look decisive, she gets to blame other people when it doesn't happen, and she gets to rally her base around a common enemy, which in this case is basically anyone who doesn't worship at the altar of oil production. It's Politics 101, find a crisis, attach your agenda to it, repeat until elected. Now let's talk about why this particular strategy is so predictable. The usual suspects on social media, and by that I mean oil industry cheerleaders, conservative commentators, and people whose entire personality is Alberta pride, were already saying this stuff before Smith even sent her email. The Venezuela news broke and within minutes, literally minutes, people were posting about how this proves Canada needs more pipelines. It's like they have a template saved on their desktop just waiting for any global oil news to pop up so they can hit copy-paste and add it to the discourse. And to be fair, Smith jumping on that bandwagon makes perfect sense from her perspective. These are her people, this is her base, and this is her issue. Why wouldn't she capitalize on it? But here's what's actually kind of funny in a dark, cynical way. Smith would have said the exact same thing no matter what happened in Venezuela. If Maduro had somehow fought off the raid and sunk a U.S. aircraft carrier, pipeline time. If China had sent paratroopers to rescue him in some kind of wild international showdown, pipeline time. If Chevron had announced they're building a new oil facility in Venezuela, also pipeline time. Literally any scenario involving Venezuela and oil would have resulted in the exact same statement from Smith because in her world, every day is a good day to build a pipeline, just like no day is apparently a good day to raise the minimum wage, but that's a rant for another video. This is just how Alberta politics works in 2025. Oil is king, pipelines are the solution to every problem, and anyone who disagrees is either naive, radical, or working for foreign interests trying to destroy Canadian prosperity. It's a simple narrative, it's effective with a certain demographic, and it allows politicians like Smith to position themselves as fighters for Alberta against the big bad federal government, environmentalists, and anyone else who dares suggest that maybe, just maybe, we should think about economic diversification or climate change or literally anything other than extracting and selling as much oil as humanly possible. So will Trump's raid actually help get a pipeline to BC's coast? Almost certainly not. The political, legal, and social barriers that existed before the raid still exist after it. BC's government hasn't suddenly changed its mind. Indigenous communities haven't suddenly dropped their concerns. Environmental groups haven't packed up and gone home. The fundamental challenges to building that pipeline are still very much in place, and one weekend of international drama doesn't change that reality. But facts have never really stopped a good political narrative, have they? What this whole situation really illustrates is how politics works in the age of crisis capitalism. Something dramatic happens somewhere in the world, and politicians immediately start calculating how they can use it to advance their pre-existing agendas. It's not about genuinely responding to new information or adapting policy to changing circumstances. It's about finding the right moment to push the same old buttons and hope that the sense of urgency or fear makes people more receptive to your message. Smith's not actually reacting to the Venezuela situation in any meaningful way. She's just using it as a convenient excuse to say what she was going to say anyway. And look, this isn't unique to Smith or Alberta or even Canada. Politicians everywhere do this. Every crisis is an opportunity, every tragedy is a chance to score political points, every unexpected event is a potential vehicle for your pet project. It's exhausting and cynical and exactly the kind of thing that makes regular people tune out of politics altogether. But it's also why staying informed matters, because if you're not paying attention, it's easy to hear pipeline plus Venezuela plus crisis and think, wow, this must be urgent and important, without realizing it's just the same conversation we've been having for years with a fresh coat of paint. The reality is that Canada's oil industry faces real challenges. Global energy markets are shifting, climate commitments are affecting demand, and yes, increased production from places like Venezuela could impact Canadian competitiveness. These are legitimate issues worth discussing. But pretending that the solution is as simple as build more pipelines and using international chaos as justification doesn't actually address the complexity of the situation. It just makes for good sound bites and rallies the base. So here we are. Trump did something absolutely wild in Venezuela, Smith tried to turn it into pipeline propaganda, and the rest of us are left wondering how any of this became our political reality. Welcome to Canada in 2025. Where international military operations somehow circle back to domestic infrastructure debates and politicians will exploit literally anything to push their agenda. It's predictable, it's relatively harmless as far as political stunts go, and it's absolutely not going to result in a pipeline to BC anytime soon. But hey, at least it's entertaining in a train wreck kind of way. Alright, that's the tea on Trump's raid and Alberta's pipeline dreams. If you enjoyed this breakdown of political opportunism at its finest, Smash that like button and let the algorithm know you appreciate quality snark with your news analysis. Subscribe if you haven't already because we're cranking out videos daily and you don't want to miss the next chapter of Canadian political absurdity. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Smith's pipeline push is justified or is this just shameless crisis exploitation? I want to hear your hot takes. Share this with anyone who needs a reality check on what's actually happening versus what politicians want us to think is happening. Until next time, stay skeptical, stay informed, and remember that not every crisis needs a pipeline as a solution. Catch you in the next one.